start off our session really with talking about, it's now 30 years of screen entertainment, video entertainment, and it's been an incredible journey, which you and your companies and brands have played a pivotal part in. As you reflect on those 30 years, what have been some of the key milestones that you see the industry go through and achieve, and challenges it's overcome?
I think these have been incredible quarter century or 30 years. The growth of media in India, especially the visual media in this country, is one of the most spectacular stories anywhere in the world. From the launch of satellite television, which almost snuck in from, in the absence of a regulation and determined effort from outside and through local enterprise, to the time that this is one of the most deeply penetrated, video market now. And it's one of the few markets where television remains, and, despite being most of the TV, despite being pay TV, it still remains in a pretty healthy state. It can get better, it can grow more, but it still remains pretty healthy. In this country, no one can say that television is dying. And the surge of streaming video business, both in terms of consumption and the size of business, is totally spectacular. So if you look at the high points, from the launch in the early 90s, between 1991 and 95, and after that, from cable and satellite revolution that came with the introduction of CAS, and some of them were disruptive for the beginning, but they kept growing the television market, the video business, and kept bringing in new consumer. And I'd like to say that a few things people have to keep in mind here. This market was globally rubbished for a long time as a low ARPU market. But I think that is exactly what was the firepower, that was the engine that drove the growth of the video industry in this country. Because television was affordable, not just to elite few in the big cities, but it increasingly became affordable to everybody. I think there was an appetite that got built, which in developed world took several decades to build. Here, literally in less than a decade, from a very, very limited or no presence, television became ubiquitous. Video consumption became ubiquitous. And it was because there was enormous local enterprise. And let's not make a mistake. This whole thing was built on domestic enterprise, domestic creativity, and bulk of it was domestic capital, except for a few companies like the company that I used to be part of, Star India then, and a few other companies. Most of it was domestic enterprise. And there were a lot of things that were not perfect. Some things were hugely imperfect, value destructive also. But by and large, the growth and explosion of video consumption and video content is one of the most amazing stories of last quarter century.
Thank you for that. Thank you for that. And I want to sort of pick up on two or three things. I think you said it's a domestic-driven industry and with some foreign capital, but in some ways also the government's enabled that with deregulation of FDI through that journey. I wanted to get your reflection on that. The second thing I want to talk to you about is distribution before we come into content, because through that journey of television, with the 4G revolution, the launch of Hotstar, there's been a lot of democratization of distribution. And I want to get your thoughts of that and whether content has actually kept up with that.
Well, I think it's still early days. I'd like to think that the first serious streaming initiative started with Hotstar, which is barely a decade old. And from there, where you come today is quite substantial. And I think the fact that about 700 million people are watching streaming content in some form or the other, and even for my own company, JioStar, today we have 500 million people coming to the platform. And we have a large number of people subscribing and paying for it. It's an enormously large number. Has the content kept pace? The answer is, by and large, it has. In segments, it has more than kept pace. So, for instance, in the sports segment, the growth has been heavily driven by the depth and spread of distribution. For us, we took the sports content and we didn't stop just at the national languages. and major regional languages. Now we have gone deep into dialects, whether you have Bhojpuri or you have Haryanvi. And those have expanded the market. Those have brought new audiences. Those have opened new streams of revenue. I think that initiative has taken off well, but the viewers, I would say, are far ahead of where the providers are.
Right.
And part of the problem is that we are still thinking that the imported model is justifiable and is sufficient. So we get content and we just say, oh, company X spends so much money on content globally. We bring that content and we try and push that here. That content is highly limiting at best. If you want to really take it to the next level, and if the content has to keep pace with the aspirations and requirements of this country, then you have to start making lots and lots more content locally, which is tailored for Indian market, tailored to Indian tastes. And, ideally it should travel to the world, but you cannot just bring the content that you're creating for the world and expect it to keep pace with the surging demand and aspirations.
Understood. And before we come in and touch on that and focus on JioStar, I wanted to kind of ask you a macro question. Today, screen entertainment or video entertainment is a $13 billion industry in India. The US is close to 200, China 75. How do you see the next 15 years journey? Because obviously, as you said, in the last 30 years, we've come from 500 million to 13 billion. But where do you see that economic value going, and what are going to be the key drivers of that?
So I think that value, the pace or rate at which the growth has taken place over the last 30 years, I see no reason why it cannot continue to grow. But there are 2 or 3 big drivers that we need to focus on. First and foremost, we need to create more content. And content that, as I said, is customized, tailored for Indian needs, number one. Number 2, we have to take distribution even deeper. As telecom and, the broadband and data revolution is going deeper and deeper into the country, the content must keep pace. And this can't be one-size-fit-all content. Definitely not the global content that's getting peddled here, but also not just content getting produced in our neighborhood in Mumbai and catering to the whole country. That model has huge limitations. The third thing is creative infrastructure. My experience is that we are limited not by capital so much, but we are limited hugely by capacity or access to storytellers, writers, producers, directors, actors. You cannot cater to the needs of this country, 750 million people who are watching content every day. And the same small universe of providers continue to churn out the content. So there is, a certain lack of innovation. There is a certain lack of connectivity with where the country has gone. I often feel that the consumers in this country are way ahead of where the producers are. And that gap needs to be bridged.
Understood. Just touching on that before we come to specifics, you talked about creative infrastructure. I wanted to talk to you about cinematic infrastructure because it just strikes me that theatrical here has, TV's coming back up, streaming is exploding, but theatrical has gone through a dip, which is unusual for an emerging market. What is driving that? What ails theatrical, and how do you see the future?
Look, theatrical, when you say theatrical has taken a dip, you have to make a distinction. Theatrical in North India has taken a huge dip.
Right.
Hindi movies have taken a huge hit. That's not the case in the southern part of the country. Whether it is Tamil, Telugu, Malayalam, Kannada, there is a creative resurgence, and that creative resurgence is translating into huge amounts of economic upsides.
Right.
But the Hindi film industry or the Bollywood has a huge problem. It is still frozen in time in terms of nature of the product that it creates, and to the point that I was just making, I think the consumers have moved far ahead, and the creative industry in Bollywood is still stuck in time. And that is clearly not working. And then there are other problems. You kept the gates, closed mostly, or when you open it too narrowly for the flood of new talent, of writers, actors, producers, directors to come in. This is a country of, where 65% of the population is under 35 years of age. And 90% of the talent in this industry is over 60 years of age. That is a clear mismatch. You cannot just make that, that equation just doesn't stack up.
Right.
Then distribution. Look at this. We have a huge shortage of exhibition screens, theaters. And whatever theaters we have, for whatever reason, they have their own economic case. But the movie-going experience is really expensive. A very senior, my own brother, who's a very senior military officer, he told me going to theaters leaves a hole in your pocket because it's expensive. In South India, it's not accidental that the ticket prices are much cheaper. Theaters, people go to theaters. Here, it's an event to go to a theater. And if the movies don't keep pace with that, people will think twice before they go there. So between distribution, creativity, new talent, and connectivity with the new India, these are serious issues that the film industry needs to deal with.
And you think it'll be resolved with more screens, more talent, more new talent coming in as well, potentially?
It should be resolved.
Yeah.
But it's not easy to resolve. Everybody has to resolve it.
Let's move to content. I want to talk a little bit, double-click on that a bit. Because we've seen in the stuff that we measure that, there's been a lot of global investment in India, whether it's from the subscription, premium streamers, and more recently we just saw YouTube announce a pretty significant investment in the creator economy, I believe, a few days ago. What is your new organization, JioStar, looking at in terms of investment in what we would call the creative economy or the storytelling economy, and how you grow that ecosystem?
You have to note that most of the system that's been created, the entire business that's been created, as I said, is by and large by companies that are based in India. They may be foreign companies, but they have Indianized themselves very well, such as Star back in the days, and a few other cable and satellite companies. But they have just, it has been developed on the back of local investment, local talent, local enterprise. It hasn't come, people come in and, land here and make these statements that, oh, we have spent so much money. Every day, Indian, media and entertainment industry is making huge investment. My own company, the two companies that came together over the last 3 years, if memory serves me right, in 2024, the two companies spent 25,000 crores on content alone.
Right. In
2025, that number went to 30,000 crores.
This year.
Yes. And that number next year will be, over 32,000, 33,000 crores. So in 3 years alone, we have spent more than $10 billion. That's what has powered this. And, if you look at the other kind, there is case for more investment. But investment is happening. Where that investment is going is an important thing. And where, who are you making that investment for? When an Indian media company is investing $1, it is investing entirely targeting the Indian consumer, their taste, their requirement, and the recovery is also from India only. When a global company spends that money, they, more often than not, they're not looking at Indian market and Indian consumer as their primary target.
So let's touch base on that. It's, as you said, $10 billion over 3 years in sports and entertainment. Now, as you look at the distribution and this new company that you guys have created with Reliance and Disney, we're the midst through this very pivotal IPL. I think we have you on record of hopefully reaching 300 million subscribers during this season from our estimates. Tell me a little bit more at a high level, first, how it's gone in the last 3 months as you guys have come together and started executing, particularly on television, the connected TV space, the streaming space. How's it gone?
Look, the audience here should be able to tell you how it's gone, but from our point of view, we are very satisfied with what we have achieved in this short period of time. Look at the context in which these two companies came together. The narrative was that pay TV is dead. The narrative was that the video streaming space for premium content is a limited space of 15, 20 million subscribers. And there was too much space that was available to grow. From there, we've come in and we created a merger, which is one of the toughest things. You know this,
Yeah.
that most media companies have struggled to bring their two streaming services together with their different tech stacks, different subscribers, different business practices, different content, etc., etc. We have changed the perception about pay TV. Pay TV has added numbers, not lost numbers, since we came together, because we are very focused that we believe that India continues to be an exciting pay TV market and will continue to be so for a while. The problem is that you decided, under the influence of some, again, external narrative, that pay TV was dead, and you stopped feeding pay TV. You stop feeding anything, the healthiest child would die. But we are committed to pay TV, and we are seeing the results. This year, whether it is an IPL or whether it is on entertainment content, we are seeing growth in connectivity. More people are buying cable and satellite subscription than for a long time. On streaming, as you said, I'm not going to comment on the numbers that you said, but you're never wrong. So I think it's been a spectacular growth. For the longest time, this market was considered a limited subscription opportunity market. That we have, that clearly, that whole hypothesis has been blown to smithereens, and we have the numbers that do justice to this market. Of course, it will always be price-sensitive market, and I am very respectful to the price-sensitive. I think the entire explosion of cable and satellite television in this country has happened because the leaders of cable and satellite industry kept price sensitivity in the market. And we need to be price sensitive because there is an affordable, if you're only selling to 15, 20 million people, you can price it at whatever value you want. But if your ambition is to take it to 300 million or 500 million people, then you have to keep their affordability very, front and center in your strategy. So we will be price sensitive, but I think the market is enormous. And we have demonstrated that in 3 months. That's a huge achievement. That said, there's a long way ahead. I think one of the biggest, critiques that I have for the global media and entertainment business is that while there has been enormous innovation in content, there has been through digital, there has been great innovation in distribution and consumption. There has been zero innovation almost in monetization models. 70 years ago, newspapers were taking advertising and charging subscription. Even today, the latest media company is still doing subscription and advertising.
Right.
And now that the advertising is under pressure because non-traditional participants have come in, and e-commerce companies participating in advertising dollars, short-form video companies doing, there are all kinds of technology companies are taking away advertising. You've not been able to identify or discover a new model of monetization. So I think as long as you don't do that, in a market like India particularly, because the advertising market has its own limitations, it's a factor of the broader consumer economy, you need to innovate. And I think in order to innovate that, you need to innovate on product, you need to innovate on content formats, and then you need to introduce new models of making money so that the consumers feel value in paying more.
Got it. And then clearly you guys are on that journey now. 3 quick questions before we wrap up. The first one is on distribution. As you said, I think we ended last year with 90 million television households, around 100 million streaming subscriptions rather than households. You guys are redefining the addressable market. TV could maybe end up at 100 million back here. How do you see that traversing over the next 5 years? And it looks like the subscriptions market is gone up to 300 million. Do you see, and how big can that be possibly over the next 3 to 5 years?
So I think the growth possibilities are enormous. It will be a factor of how much innovation, how much India-focused innovation happens from all the key operators. But I think the growth rate that we have seen over the last 3 decades If anything, that can only get stronger because, the distribution, the universe of consumers is much bigger today than it has ever been. And there is an opportunity. It's still not saturated. You can keep driving deeper. And the second thing is that I think in terms of advertising, to get a better share of advertising, India has only seen the first phase of brand building.
Right.
The problem is that we have, by and large, most of us, we have limited ourselves to the same pool of advertisers that were there. I think there is a need to go deeper and create new brands, because the economic activity has become highly decentralized. And the value creation is happening in not just tier 2 cities and towns, it's gone down to tier 3 and tier 4. We need to find ways to make those economic activities, help them scale up, create bigger brands, expand their market, and participate in the value creation that we do, that's happening over there. If that happens, I don't see why this market cannot double in the next 5 years.
Got it. 2 quick questions for you. Maybe not your favorite questions, but one is business and one is policy. But, on the business side, the whole idea of a modern media company has changed. But when you look at the market caps, public and private, of different companies around, you have Tencent in China, which is in the entertainment business, both video and gaming, at a $565 billion. Netflix, who we'll hear from later today, at around $465 billion. ByteDance, I think, has been privately valued at $400. It's come down to $200. Your company is, I think, around coming up to $10 billion. Let's say that. But the whole notion of a media company has changed. I mean, these companies that I just mentioned are more technology and media companies. So when does an Indian company join the ranks of that list? And what do you think is it going to take?
So, look, again, to the point that I was earlier making, that the notion of media company has changed. Unfortunately, most of the media companies haven't changed.
Right.
They remain, exactly the same thing. Two streams of monetization, advertising revenue and subscription. Advertising has come under pressure. There have been many many segments that have come in and taken value. So media companies are under pressure. The reason their values, reason the Chinese company that you talked about is valued at what it is valued at, and the Western media companies are struggling, is primarily because there is no innovation. There is no, there is pressure on the existing streams of revenue, and no new streams of revenue and income have come up.
Right.
There, in most of the Western markets, their subscriber or consumer numbers have hit a plateau, and there is not enough growth because of the population reasons. So I think there is a real opportunity for an Indian company to break through all of this and create, globally, value that can be indexed globally. But for that, we will have to innovate on the monetization model. We'll have to we cannot limit our innovation only to content. That's the default. That's the beginning of the story. But once you do that, you have to be more and more innovative about how you make more money. Because once you have a trajectory, that is when the market and the shareholders value you.
Got it. Well, with that in mind, what's your closing thought on policy and regulation of this, what I would call the digital entertainment space? Particularly because as the regulators here grapple with television, streaming, new regulations, and whether you should have, regulate up or down, what's your view on that?
Television is a very different business. It's a household subscription. People, it's a big screen. Digital businesses, digital screens are private screens, personal screens, individual screens. The two have a very different purpose. And there is, the two are in a very different stage of evolution. One is mature, somewhat aging, getting, the other is just emerging. And you need to leave them free to compete. If you need to support where it is required.
Well, on that note, Uday, thank you very much. And
thank you, Vivek.
Hope the audience enjoyed it. Thank you.